One of the deep things is that we always talk about purpose. Everywhere you go online, everywhere you go, um, even within, right? All the actions that we make and all of these sort of decisions and endeavors and risks that we take are all linked somewhere to a search for this sense of meaning, right? And I just saw a video recently that I thought could really help this discussion is this idea of finding meaning in the suffering. And I thought that this was deep because, first of all, it was Shia LaBeouf, right, which was talking about this. And what I felt was deep about this is that there is this sense of suffering, right? And the easiest way that we can understand suffering is sort of like this idea of constant change, right? Constant change. We can't really attach ourselves to anything because things will leave. We can't really um, just hit a certain goal and stop because then there's always another one, and so not really that much meaning in particular. There's not really a plateau. Is what I'm trying to say. There's a beyond. But then within that suffering of things constantly changing, we realize that it's not just. This is the thing: is that it's not just all changing. There are things which remain, right? Because the first point about purpose, where this discussion starts, we ask ourselves the real question is, what is the purpose of our existence here? And that question is directly correlated to who are we? You can start there. Those things are clearly linked. If you're not who you are, your purpose wouldn't be this. Boom. That being said, in who we are, there are some things which are fundamental that won't change. Even on tombstones, we write he was the father of, he was a great husband, a great father, um, a great son, etc. If we look at it that way, that even in death, there are things in which we that will shape our identity even beyond um, the realm of everything that exists around us. Then we realize that well, those things, right, and what they mean to us become the foundational pieces to who we are, right? And if that's the case, then they become one of the most important things to work on and where to start with this whole question of purpose, right? And sometimes what happens with this whole thing, right, this whole foundation of identity that we have is that we tend sometimes to take it for granted. We take for granted sometimes the fact that we are, you know, children to our parents, right? The sons or the daughters to to other people, and that we are brothers, sisters, maybe to other people, that we are friends to other people, that we are neighbors to some people, right? Etc. etc. And in all those things, we sometimes can make it about ourselves and forget that those people too, um, that you mean something to them. What's deep about that conversation is that in itself, when you look at this question of suffering, right, the fact that everything is going to change around you and that's something that you got to sort of accept, but it's hard. Well, in that suffering, there is that meaning. There is that meaning that you can be of that suffering can have value for other people. And I think that no matter what it is that you go into that has meaning in life, that concept will always apply. That if what it is that you struggle, that you are willing to go through, can be valuable or meaningful, right, in this life, then it's sort of worth. You can find purpose in that itself. Purpose doesn't have to be what we typically like try to identify it with, or at least not the starting blocks of it. And maybe somewhere along the way, you can find whatever it is that you expect to find, right? You can start with this because this is real, right? You being the son to your parents, or an older brother, a younger brother, a middle child, whatever it is, and get more familiar with what does that actually mean for me, and realize that that perspective becomes now sacred to you, right? And that perspective is only you who can see and it becomes also your responsibility to keep alive. From that point moving forward, now you have meaning by definition. Now you have a perspective. Now you have a reason to act. Now you can find actions which align with those things. But it will require you to surrender to those things. It will require you to surrender to that perspective, to let go of trying to fulfill all your desires of meaning and of control by yourself. And that's huge, right? Because by letting go of control, you'll allow yourself to have faith in yourself and in the world around you that things will work out, and you won't create all these blocks that stop you from moving forward. And I made a whole video about this just the other day, about how, in a way, what we're talking about here, right, this idea of trying to control everything is lust, and it's ego, it's an illusion of self. That's what lust will do, and that's what stops you from surrendering to what ultimately is sort of your authentic perspective of the world. And if you can just start there, if you can just start there, boom, now you have ground which is solid, that you can start with. Because as we have seen earlier, even beyond the concept of life and death, that remains. And I wish I would have understood this far earlier, right? And I think that concept of taking for granted that those things are just there to stay is a huge mistake, right? Because I know that everybody watching this can find this. Everybody watching this can be a friend to somebody else, and not just expect the world to be a friend to you. You can go out there and be the source of meaning to people, and in that way, the suffering that you are experiencing will have meaning. It will be of value, and it will be something that gives you purpose. And you got to realize maybe when you stop looking for purpose and realize that it is right there, that maybe at that exact moment you will genuinely find actual purpose in life. Maybe that's when it comes to us, and that makes a lot of sense. Maybe when we surrender to what it is that we truly are, then the perspective is clear. But sometimes, because we search for a more thrilling answer, sometimes we search for a more like cinematic thing or whatever, we think that what we actually have is not enough. We think that, oh no, well, I feel like that's kind of lame, and maybe there must be more, like there must be something else, I gotta try something else. And then we step out of character, we step out of what we actually do. I know a lot of people that are good at things, or that have great space within to be more empathetic and are really smart, but won't allow themselves to sort of perform at the things that they're good at. And that can be photography, that can be writing, that can be music, it could be all of those things, but won't go into those things because somewhere I think we all struggle with this idea that, man, maybe this is kind of lame, maybe I won't make money with it, maybe it's not worth doing. But in actuality, that might be the actual Maybe that is actually your purpose, as like how much closer to yourself and a sense of self it brings you, right? I read a book, it's actually right here, by Ryan Holiday. It's called Stillness is the Key. And in that concept, it kind of resonates with what we're talking about here. Sometimes the whole question of stillness, right? And stillness is like clarity. Stillness is like um, to do nothing. We start to face fear, right? And that's ego, illusion. We think that we always have to be doing these great things, and by how much we are exposed online by all these concepts of morning routines and trying to 10x your revenues and ROIs and stuff, we try to optimize and do the most. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but we sometimes start to have an approach which is more of fear about what we actually do. And at that point, we think that by constantly being in movement and running around and doing all this extra stuff, that we somehow are more. But all we end up doing is trying to do everything and actually getting nothing done, right? Whereas if you would just maybe pick one perspective and stick to it, and not trying to do what everybody says is good, like like doing the perfect diet and the ice bath and the skin routine and drinking the matchas and dressing like they told me online and going to the seminars and doing all that and watching all the YouTube videos so that I don't have the fear of missing out on all these things. We got to realize that that's ego, that's noise. And sometimes we unconsciously like to give in to the noise just so that we can not face what we truly have to get done, because we fear that people won't love us for who we truly are. We fear that it's not enough. And that's when we got to realize that if we're not willing to give that attention, that which earlier in the video we have discussed was actually important in life, like who we are, our authentic perspective, that which we have to protect. It's not meant for you to talk about or share. Nobody will understand. But if we don't understand that, if we don't give that attention, how can anybody else do? How can anybody else do? Because you're the one that was supposed to bring it to life. By giving it attention, right? By caring about yourself in that way, by being in stillness, by living your life in that perspective, by doing actions which align with that, what we're doing is we're bringing it to life. And if we just start to understand that all those illusions of self by running around and trying to do everything at the same time is just an illusion that fulfills like an image that we're great. You realize that great is much more simple or subjective than that. It's different, let's just say. But it has to start with ourselves. And so when it comes to purpose, so that I don't make this video too long, purpose has to start with, what are we really asking for? It's not about purpose for what looks good to people. When we ask what is the purpose of our existence here, it's really much more simple than that. Who are you in this life? You're a son, you're a daughter, you're a husband, you're a father. Well, why don't we just start there? And like, isn't it funny how simple it sounds? It's like, why don't we just start there? We don't feel like that's enough? Isn't that already kind of crazy? What does that entail for you? Don't you see that you being those things isn't about you? But by you being those things, you're that to other people. And that's massive. And I don't think you know how much like that has meaning. And I don't think you know how much that can change things in your life. Yeah. Maybe let that sink in a little bit. See you guys on the next one.